Okay, let's go ahead and get started. This is color grading inside of Davinci Resolve. Now, if you want to take a tutorial about how to get around Davinci Resolve, you can take a little tour here that you can check out. That'll kind of show you how to use the user interface a little bit. But if you're interested in learning how to color and color grade, well, then this is the place to be. Okay, so what I'll be showing you is how to go from this to this, or this is a famous frame made available by Juan Melara. He's got a great blog out there with some excellent resources, and I'll refer to some of his stuff in this tutorial as well. And so I'll show you how to go from this raw frame to this, kind of a cool blockbuster look. And then finally, one more example here using some different combinations of techniques to go from this to this. Okay, now I need to apologize. I know many of you have been asking for this tutorial for a little while now, and I'm sorry it's taken this long. And so by way of explanation, the reason why is that I've been working on another training series that's been taking up all of my time. It's called Make the Right Video. In fact, if a large part of your video production life involves making videos for paying clients, or if that's something that you want to start doing, this course is going to be a great resource. It's basically the course to take if you want to learn how to turn your video production skills into something clients will really start to pay money for, right? How to weaponize your video production skills, really. So if that sounds interesting to anyone, check out the link here. And since you guys are coming from Filmmaker Central, I'm sticking this ridiculously awesome discount here for you too, which is kind of what I send around to the people who are my friends, right? So definitely take advantage of that if that looks like something that's going to be helpful for you. But let's go ahead and start color grading. First, we're going to need to look at a little bit of color theory. So if you take a look at this color wheel here, you can see the primary colors, right? You got blue, red, and green there. Now, in additive color, this is additive color refers to the color that involves light, right? If you add those colors together, you get white light. Now, subtractive color is kind of like the color we interact with in the real world with things like paint, right? So if I take paint and I mix a bunch of different colors of paint together, I'm going to get brown or kind of black, right? It gets darker. But with light, it's different. When you add those primary colors together, you get white. Okay, and so you can use this to manipulate color in a way. If you want an image to look more green, you can add green to it. And if you want to pull green out of an image, you actually add magenta to it, right? Same thing with blue and red. You can take blue out of an image by adding yellow, and you can take red out of an image by adding cyan, right? So you can manipulate colors that way. So that's the same thing you're going to be doing inside of Davinci Resolve. So let's take a look at how that works. Here we are now inside of Davinci Resolve, and the large way how this works is your color grades, your filters are all going to pass through nodes, okay? And you can see that up here in this area. These are the nodes, okay? And so a correction or an adjustment will pass through these series of nodes starting from the left to the right, and it will flow through these filters to make those adjustments. So if we take an example here, we take a look here at this node. We've got one node on here, we've got the raw footage, everything looks really flat, and if I make an adjustment here maybe to offset, you can see it'll start to get lighter kind of. If I add another node, then I could take this one, I could start to add some blue to that image, you'll see it start to get blue, and you can see that update inside these nodes right here. Okay, so the nodes operate in a series, but as you saw maybe a second ago, there's different combinations of things that you can do, different techniques that you can use the nodes for that'll make these really powerful. And so that's one of the things that we want to cover is how do we use different adjustments and different filters in these nodes to really get an image that looks pleasing, right? So first, what I want to do is let's go ahead and look through all the tools that Davinci Resolve has. So what are all these things down here, and what are all the different methods that we have to manipulate an image? What are all these buttons? We're going to look at all the tools first, and then we're going to go back through and I'll regrade these shots. We'll kind of get to see some real life applications of how you could combine all those tools together to get something that's really pleasing, right? So first, let's go ahead and take a look here at some of these tools. The first one that's going to be one of the most important ones, I'm going to delete these nodes here, kind of reset this stuff here, is your scopes. Okay, so if I right click on this image here and hit show scopes, you'll see this little window pop up. Now you might see it like this. These are all 4 scopes that Davinci Resolve offers inside of the software. You've got a waveform, vector scope, histogram, and parade. Okay, so first let's take a look at waveform because that's really the most important one that you're going to use the majority of the time. This shows all of your color information as well as your exposure information going kind of top to bottom like this. Okay, so you can see right in this area, this is showing all the color information for here, kind of over the shoulder. Then you can see some things kind of light up in this area. Okay, and you can see different, different kind of color ranges and things going on there. And as you come across, it's all dark, there's shadows and things, and you can see sort of the shadows of things here. Now if I manipulate this image, you can see if I use offset, right, it'll start to raise the that image there, and you can see that it gets brighter, right? And then I can also see, okay, where are my shadows going? And I can start to bring that down and introduce some more contrast. If I were to add saturation, you'd see the contrast and the colors shift out of each other, and then you see that show up there. So the waveform is really powerful because it lets you see if you're clipping anything, right? If I go way down here, I can start to see I'm clipping my blacks, and I'm getting crushed way down, and that I'm losing that information. You can also see that if you're going to go way to the top and start clipping information off of the top, okay, and now I'm losing data. So the waveform is really powerful to make sure that you're keeping your data, but it'll also show you which colors are overlapping and how to balance different colors. So similar things with these other ones. Parade is just like a waveform, but you've got the red, green, and blue channels separated from each other, which can kind of be helpful. You've got the vector scope. This shows saturation, so you've got red, green, and blue, and then the middle colors there, magenta, yellow, and cyan. And as you add saturation to an image, you can see where the color information is pushing towards which colors. So this helps you see saturation in a more technical level, and then the histogram, which is purely for exposure. So you can see that we're kind of exposed down to the left. It's kind of a darker image, but if we start raising the exposure, you could see kind of that information stretching. And ideally what you want to do is start to get this information stretched broadly around the histogram, because you're getting kind of a more contrasty image, better exposure, taking better advantage of all the channels you have available there. So for most of the time you're going to use a waveform. Okay, a waveform is kind of like a histogram in the sense that you could read it going up and down, and if you could see this stretching up and down, you have a good idea if you're taking advantage of all that information that's available to you. Okay, so these are the scopes. Waveform is probably going to be your best friend here. Okay, so starting off, we've got this tab right here on the left. Okay, so this is your camera raw tab. If you're shooting raw video, this is going to be one of the first things that you can use. This clip I'm using is a ProRes clip, so you don't really see any of this stuff show up here. Okay, but if I were to go to this red frame, you can see now I've got these options to change what kind of color space we're using and make sure that it's interpreting in the right way. A good example of this was shot on one of the Blackmagic cinema cameras. Okay, this is a raw clip, and you can see, okay, decode using project settings. I'm going to change that to clip, and then instead of having a Rec 709 color space, I'm going to change that to Blackmagic Design Film, because it was shot in a log profile, and now I can actually see that log profile like I had before. Okay, so the log profile, if you're not familiar with that, it's kind of a low contrast, low saturation image because it helps take advantage of all the data in the sensor. And so most raw images you'll see come out of the camera like this. And so when you're grading, you're going to want to look at it how you shot it. Okay, now you could also apply kind of an adjustment to make it look kind of more natural. If you wanted to start from that point, this is kind of where you can adjust those settings that apply to raw footage. I mean, there's other options here too as well. You can adjust the color temperature, and you can adjust the ISO and things like that in certain settings. Change different principles for the different available options for the raw video. Okay, so that's the camera raw tab. Okay, so moving on, we've also got this tab. This is if you've got one of these X-Rite color checkers and you have that in your shot in the video, you can put this color chart on there, apply this to show wherever you've got those colors on the image, hit match, and it'll adjust your shot to kind of balance everything to a good looking shot. So that's a really quick way that you can get your shot balanced. We don't have anything that on here, but we're going to keep moving along. So here now we have some of the real the color manipulation tools, right? So here we've got the color wheels. The color wheels come in two different flavors. You've got primaries and you have log. Okay, so if we take a look at this image, I'm going to show you what the difference is here. Now with primaries, you can see in this graph that you've got lift, gamma, and gain. And so the lift adjustment will adjust all of the color information starting heavily in the shadows, and it will move all the way up to the very, very top to the gain side. Gamma does the same thing, but now in the midtones, but it still does adjust some of the lift and the gain does the same thing, but in the highlights, really heavy adjustments in the highlights, but it does extend all the way down to the very bottom there in the lift area. So you can see this with an image, right? So if I pull it, we have the scopes up here, and if I make a gain adjustment, and I'm just doing the exposure here using this little dial, you'll see it adjusts the highlights, but you can see it does still wiggle a little tiny bit of the shadows, right? And if I do the lift, it brings the bottom down, but you can see it also brings down even the highlights. It stretches all the way out to those, okay? And the gamma, same kind of thing, okay? Does the middle, but it also adjusts everything else on top and the bottom. Okay, so using primaries is a good tool when you want to make kind of blanket adjustments. It's going to be a really soft adjustment. It's not going to be extremely precise, okay? It's going to kind of adjust everything in the image with certain places of emphasis. This can be really useful in certain situations. Now, log is different, okay? So if we look at log here, now we've got shadow, midtone, highlight, and offset. And so now if we look at, let's take a look at what log looks like on this graph. So you can see you've got shadows, midtones, and highlights, and the adjustments there are more specific. In fact, with log, you can actually adjust how much of these areas that they adjust, right? So if we come back here to inside of Davinci Resolve, you can see you've got the low range and the high range, okay? So if I wanted to adjust maybe just like this sliver of the darks down here on the bottom of my waveform, so let's say, for example, I take the shadows down, and see I can push those down, and it doesn't manipulate anything else. It just, you can see how there's kind of like a shelf where it stops it. So if I pull this adjustment down and start to change the low range, you'll see that I can actually make that be even more precise. And so I can choose to just have these little tiny bits of the shadows there, okay? So that's a really powerful tool to use, because you can see I can just crunch down the tips of the shadows there, expand some of that information, and this is also useful for using color, right? So I can also use this to colorize specific parts or to balance an image in a specific way. So the log is it's really helpful in that sense. However, you're not going to want to use log for sometimes for things like, if you're trying to warm up maybe some skin tones. I mean, a lot of times if you use log, it'll be too precise. Obviously, you can change it to be as precise as you want it to be, but it won't have kind of as natural of just an easy push of color. It'll be more precise and it'll look a little bit weird. Okay, so log is going to be, it's for more of the precise things. And I'll show you some examples of how you use that here a little later on. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the other tools here. You've got another option to manipulate your primary. So this is lift, gamma, and gain, but this is channel by channel. So now you can take the gain setting, or the gamma setting, or the middle, and you can just adjust the red channel if you want to, right? Or you can just adjust the green channel. You can see those channels moving around there on my waveform. Just the blue, or you can change the blue on the gain here, okay? So this is a way to manipulate each specific channel. If you see a color cast in an image, then you can use these options to easily kind of pull that color cast out, and we'll see some examples at it in a little bit. RGB mixer is the output of each of those channels. This is actually another way in theory that you could add saturation to an image. So if I bump up all the red and the green and the blue here, what that does is essentially is just adding more saturation, okay? And so you can take some saturation out of the blue channel if you wanted to. Another helpful tool there, okay? Now let's take a look at some of these tools here. We've got curves, okay? So curves is pretty powerful. If you hit this window down here, it'll blow it up, and you can use this to do some more precise manipulation of the image. A classic thing here is the contrast S curve. So if I pull this down here, you can see how it adjusts different parts of my waveform. Let me pull up my scopes here. And so you can see how it adds contrast in the shadows, and I can manipulate that and make it softer and get different kinds of levels of exposure. And you can raise up the highlights. Now you've got a lot more information being used across all of the waveform. Now obviously the image isn't looking really awesome yet, but this is kind of how the tool is used, right? Now let's reset this. You can also ungang these curves, and if you do that, then each curve is going to be used separately. So you can adjust red and then green separately from each other, and then you can actually do some unique adjustments with just each of those channels if you want to get that specific, right? So go ahead and reset these. That's the curves. Click out of there to get that out. So let's go ahead and take a look at the qualifier tab, which you can see down here. Now what you can use this for is to select specific color ranges. So for example, if I click on the skin tones, you won't see actually anything change, but if you hit this highlight button, Now you can see what I'm kind of trying to qualify. So I can hit the greens here to try and grab more of the trees, or you can go for more of this yellows, or we can try to hit up some more of these skin tones, okay? And then you can use these adjustments here to change the width of that image or that you're trying to qualify. Let's try and get it a little closer to trying to see exactly the skin tones here. I'm gonna blur some of that selection, okay? And then try and center around a little bit more here. It'll go a little tighter. And let's see if I can grab a little bit more. Okay, so you can start to see a little bit of what that's grabbing. Okay, and this is a ProRes clip, so there's not really as much information as you would have in a RAW, so you start to get some more of this blocking stuff. But you can use this in combination with a power window, for example, as well, and then really isolate maybe just the skin area that you're looking for. Okay, so what this would let you do is then you could just adjust whatever was highlighted there, so you can start to see pushing some more warmth maybe into the skin tones there, or pushing some blue or whatever it was you're wanting to try to do, right? So that's a way that you can isolate different ranges in an image, specifically with color. Now you can change these on and off to do just luminance or just saturation or hue, and kind of be more specific on what exactly you're trying to grab. So that's kind of a powerful tool there. Now you look, we also saw this power window option here that we used a second ago. I'm gonna make a new node and show you what some of this does. So there's a couple different presets here that you can use, squares and circles and different kinds of power windows and gradients, that kind of thing. And so that's kind of like qualifying, but it's using a mask, right? So I can make a circle here, and maybe I'll just put this around the subject and blur that out a little bit, and then I can change the offset, bring the offset and the exposure up, and drop that a little tiny bit, shadows down, and maybe bring some saturation in here a little bit. Ooh, actually maybe not. Okay, and so you can see that power window. If I go really extreme here just to show what this does, everything inside of that mask is what's going to be adjusted, right? And so you can use these to add some warmth in a certain area of the image, or you can invert them to do everything outside of that mask. Okay, another method to kind of isolate certain parts of an image, which is definitely a really powerful tool to use. Okay, so let's go ahead and get rid of that one. Now moving on, we've got the tracker. Okay, so we have this image here before. And now say if we wanted this, if the person moves across the screen, we can use the tracker to track the power window, and this is actually a really useful tool. So let's put this, kind of lock it right onto here, onto her face. And then if I just hit this forward button, it'll track that power window, and see it sticks it really easy. So this is one of a really nice feature that Resolve has, because this is one of the best trackers I think I've ever seen. So you can do that with any power window, and it'll track it across an image and kind of stick it right onto there. So that's a really powerful, useful tool to use. Okay. Moving on, you've got some blur. You can blur an image, and so I'm actually adding that blur inside of the power window that we used. Okay, and so that's how all of these adjustments work inside of the node. So you can see the actual, if you look on the node here, you can see everything is gray, is not going to receive that adjustment, and everything inside the power window is. Okay. So if I'm using a blur here, it's just going to blur whatever's inside of that adjustment. If I wanted to blur everything of the image, I would just make a new node and then blur everything in the image that way. Okay. So again, just kind of going over how some of these tools work. This is the key input. You can see here, this is the information that the node is actually applying, and so you can have a better idea of how those adjustments are being applied to the image. Then here, finally, we've got sizing, so you can pan and tilt and zoom the image in and outside of your frame, basically cropping it up. And then here we've got 3D and then a burn-in option. 3D doesn't have any functionality inside of Davinci Resolve Lite. And then burn-in, you can put time code in the image down on the bottom, or different information that you want to burn onto the image, maybe for dailies or things like that. Okay, so those are the tools, right? So now let's go ahead and take a look at the process of using those tools, combining those together into different formats that actually result in kind of a good-looking image, right? How do you use those tools to color grade an image? Okay, so the process of color grading kind of it comes in kind of 3 different steps. You've got color correct, color grade, and then I call it polish. So color correct deals more with just making sure the image is balanced well, making sure there's not any color casts, making sure that everything is exposed well, and the kind of everything is a kind of up to a par, is kind of a decent looking image. And the color grade is where you stylize the image. So maybe you look at kind of make it look like a blockbuster look, right? Or you're going for something kind of out of the Matrix with that green harsh colors, right? So this is where you stylize the look. This is the color grade. And then finally polish. And so this is more about adding more adjustments to taste and also revisiting your previous nodes to help fine tune the look. So maybe after you stylize it, you discovered, oh, oops, exposure is off a little bit. Let's go back. Let's revisit some of the exposure. Let's make sure everything is kind of polished up. Maybe I should add a power window in there somewhere to kind of tweak everything just a little bit. That's sort of the polish phase. So you're going to flow through that phase, starting at color correct, then color grade, and then finally polish. So with this first node, we're going to go through some of that color correction process, right? We're going to want to introduce a lot more saturation. We'll go up as far as we can, in fact, and then maybe we're even going to come in here and increase the saturation this way. Okay, that might be a little bit heavy. We'll see that once we change the exposure a little bit. Okay, and then let's go offset. Okay, let's lift some of the gamma up. Let's bring the gain down. You can put a little contrast in, get some more of the gain. Let's do some more offset, and you're going to kind of balance between these, kind of pushing and pulling to try to get your image kind of looking where you want it. Let's do a little bit more offset. Pull the lift down. Okay, a little bit of gamma. Okay. And we could go a little bit more saturation. Okay. So we're starting to get, we're going from having just that log image, right, that really flat image, trying to give it some more color, get it back up to kind of where we're wanting it to go a little bit. Okay, so we've got some of that exposure level going on. So now let's do some local adjustments. So we're going to add another node here. Let's put a power window on there. Pull this up. Okay. So what we could do is try to add some emphasis to the subject here, right? So let's raise up some exposure in there. When you do that, you'll kind of see that it loses some of its shadow power, right? So we can bring the shadows down a little bit. You could even just touch up a little bit of warmth to the image. Okay, so you can see it start to add some emphasis there. And then even further so, let's take this, right click on it, and then let's do add outside node. And so this node will adjust everything outside of that power window. And so we could bring the offset down and come back here. Let's look at our power window again. Soften that up just a little bit. Okay, and so now you can see even more of that difference, right? Of what we're going for there a little bit. Maybe just soften this still up just a little bit more. Okay. Okay, so we've got some local adjustments. We've kind of changed a little bit of the saturation in here. Let's move that up just a sliver. Okay. So now if we wanted to stylize a little bit, let's go ahead and take a look at that. So we've got some of the color correction. I think this is looking fine. Let's try and stylize it just a touch. So we'll go over here and let's push some blues kind of down here, and we'll do a little bit in the shadows. Okay. Now you'll see we're pushing the colors kind of down to the blue area here, but the actual shadows are looking blue, and we don't really want the shadows to look blue, but we do kind of want to have sort of a blue effect. So what you can do is, now we've done that on this node, let's add one more, and then let's go to a log setting and take the shadows, and let's lower this a little bit. And we can see we're kind of clipping, so I'm going to go back to the front. Let's raise the offset just a bit here and go back here. And so now what you can see, we're clipping, and the blacks are looking really blue because red is all the way down here. Okay, so that's what makes the blue kind of overpower it. So we're going to want to push the red back up so it can balance with some of that color information there. So we can actually push red into the shadows and see how it's starting to balance there on my waveform. Okay, and I can adjust this to kind of say how much of that I want to do. Okay, so now my blacks are actually starting to look kind of black, right, which is sort of what I want. And now the information is a little higher, so I can come back to this original adjustment and I can bring my shadows back down. Try to offset just a little bit. Bring those shadows down a little bit there. And I'm going to Dial this one back up again. Let's kind of take maybe a little bit less of that red. Keep everything kind of balanced there. Okay, so this color area is kind of looking how I want it to look, but everything here is kind of looking a little too blue, right? So here's how you protect the skin tones. Okay, so we're going to add a layer node. Okay, so we've got a mixer here. Let's delete this, and I'll pass it through here. Okay, so what this is doing is you've got the look applied here on the top, and then you're passing a qualifier under the bottom, and they're going to mix together. So whatever I qualify inside this tab here, so for example, if I put a power window on here, everything inside of this power window is not going to get that look applied to it, right? It's going to pass through it. And then everything on the outside will get that look applied to it. So I'm not going to use a power window, but what I'm actually going to use instead is I'm going to use a qualifier. Okay, so I'll turn on my highlights, and then let's go ahead and look at the skin tones. Okay, so let's kind of try and zoom in here a little bit, try to grab some of this stuff. And then let's make sure we're changing our width. I want to try to grab just the kind of yellow areas of their skin. And her skin kind of looks a little bit blue, so it's going to make it a little bit tricky here. Blur this up a little bit. Okay, and soften. Okay, so doing that, now we can see, okay, we've qualified the skin here, and now the outside is still looking blue, but the skin is actually getting protected from that. Okay, and so you can see it kind of falling off a little bit onto the sides, and so what you can do to kind of help balance that just a little bit is go back to the look, and maybe we say this is just a little bit too strong, so let's bring some of the blues back. And then we can take this actual qualifying node here, let's double click on this, and we can actually warm up what we qualified inside of that qualifier. And you won't really see it actually apply here, but you'll see it after you apply it on the mixer. Okay, so you take this information, try to just bump that up a little bit, go back to the mixer. Okay, so you can see now she's looking natural, but everything around and on the outside is kind of looking blue. So a cool option of having this stuff set up this way is you can take this original node where you had that look applied, and you can actually drag this around a different direction. So we could actually bring this over, instead of making it cool, we can make it kind of like a warmer look. Okay, and it still protects the skin tones, and it still protects the shadows. Leave that there like that, because that's keeping them there. Okay, and you can drag this around in all kinds of different directions if you wanted to, but it'll still keep things kind of looking natural. Okay, so we've kind of added a styled look here. We can see the difference adding these in and out. Let's go ahead and go back to here. I'm going to raise up some more of the exposure on her face. Push her just a little bit warmer. And let's go to the shadows and try to just bring down a little bit of contrast. Bring this up a little bit so you can see that a little easier. Okay, so there's some shadows there. Okay, and then you can see the difference there with that adjustment. Okay. So then finally, to add a little bit more polish, we could add another node here, go to a power window, and just do maybe a little bit of a vignetting, right? Just a slight one. So let's up this size just a little bit. Drop the exposure, and let's put that inverted, and so you can start to see, you can see on the waveform that kind of crunch off into the side there. Okay, so there's kind of a kind of a graded example of that look there, and we can see this. Let's go ahead and go full screen. Okay, and so you can see this applied on and off. There's the log, the original footage, and here's kind of a new look, right? Okay, so that principle of applying a look inside of a layer mixer and then qualifying to protect the skin tones is one of the most fundamental kind of methods of color grading that there is. So let's go ahead and take a look at one more example here. Okay, so here we've got this frame, and let's go ahead and try and do a blockbuster look. Okay, so this frame is was made available by Juan Melara. Go ahead and check out his stuff. Let's go through and try and do a similar kind of thing like we did before, right? Okay, so first we've got to do some color correction. Okay, so bring up some maybe the exposure a little bit here. Let's drop down the shadows just a touch. And if we bring in some saturation to the image, you can kind of start to see it looks kind of like we've got a little bit of a red cast to it, and you can see that here on the waveform. The red channel is kind of sitting up on top of the other stuff. So if we use this option here, we can actually just click down the offset of our whole red channel just a little bit. Okay, and if you do that, you'll see it kind of really start to balance out, and maybe just take the blue just a little bit. Okay, so that will help balance the image, and you can see that looks kind of a lot more natural. Okay, so now we can bring in a little bit more saturation, maybe a touch of contrast. Okay, so already we're kind of getting something that looks a little more punchy, right? And so this is just bringing in general exposure, global adjustments, that kind of thing. So now let's do a little bit of a local adjustment. So we're going to go ahead and add another serial node here. Let's take this power window, kind of drag this over to this side, and we're going to have this be kind of an offset adjustment here, so we can kind of bring down some of that color there. And so now we've got that kind of taken the side, giving a little bit more focus on him there and on the right there, right? Okay, so now let's go ahead and add a look, right? That's looking fine to me, and you can see how much better this footage held up as a red footage frame than the ProRes stuff we were doing before, right? And so this is going to be a really big example of showing why those cameras are so expensive. Okay, so here we're looking at this. Let's go ahead and add the color grade. So we're going to go ahead and add a node. It's going to be a similar thing like we did before. So let's go ahead and push this to let's kind of push a little bit of we're using the primaries here. Let's kind of start to push some blue down into the shadows, and we're going to just push a little tiny bit of green down. Okay, do a little bit more this way, bump up just a little bit of saturation. Okay, so we're kind of starting to get a cool look there. It's bleeding into the skin tones, and we're also seeing that the actual shadows aren't looking black. They're looking kind of blue. I mean, it looks fine. Well, not really, but we're gonna go on. Let's go and kind of make it look a lot better, right? So let's fix the skin tones, but let's also fix the shadows. So first we're gonna do the shadows. Add another serial node. Okay, let's go ahead and look in here using the middle mouse button to kind of pan around. Here's the shadows, and so with this we're gonna go into a log format. Here's the shadow option. Let's drag this down a little bit, and remember how we pushed blue into the shadows before. Now we want to push red into the shadows this way to kind of help balance that, and you can see that. See how it starts to look more black, whereas before it looked blue like this. Okay, so push that in, try to make those shadows look black. Okay, so now we've still got the blue cast, but we're not getting blue shadows. Okay, so we've got a blue look, but not the shadows. Okay, so we can go back here. I'm gonna add some more saturation, and I think I might even add a little bit of push some of that blue a little bit more. We'll have to go back and balance some of that. Okay, so it's a little heavier of a look. Let's go back in here. Let's make sure that we add just a little bit of red still back into that. Okay, nice. Okay, kind of looking good. So now let's go ahead and do, let's protect the skin tones, okay, and get the skin coming back in. So the same thing like we did before. Let's go ahead and add a layer node. Okay, we're going to delete this connection here and then connect it with this one. Okay, so now you've got the color on top, the qualifier deciding what gets the look and what doesn't, and then mixing together in the layer mixer down here on the bottom. Okay, so let's go ahead and say, all right, we want to do the skin tones. Okay, and you'll see how much easier this is because of the information that's in this red frame. Go ahead and try and grab this. Okay, and then let's make some adjustments here to try to grab just the spots we're looking for. Okay, And you notice how much easier it was to grab that information I was looking for. We're going to go ahead and blur this, soften that up a little bit. Let's soften these edges. Okay, so that's the skin tones. If you take the highlight off, you can see that now we've got the look passing through, but we don't have the skins are protected, right? Now he kind of looks a little bit like an Oompa Loompa, and so the way to get rid of that is adjusting the key on the actual the node there. So you can see here, if we go to the key, you can see what's being keyed and what's being allowed to pass through the look and what's not. An easy way to do that is just adjust the gain. So if we go down to like maybe 5, you can see now he's actually getting applied some of the look on top rather than nothing. If we wanted to do stronger, we could go higher with this, maybe 0.8. So he's starting to look kind of orange. Or again, we can go down for a weaker key, and so he still gets some of his skin's protected, but he still gets some of the look applied to him. So maybe I think maybe about 5 is what we're looking for. You can even do adjustments here by pushing some of the midtones to colorize him just a little bit. Okay, and so now you've kind of got the look applied. It's kind of stylized, so you can go back through and do a little bit of polish. So again, like I did before, I think I'll want to try and do a little bit of a vignette again to add some focus. Okay, so going full screen on this, okay, so here's what we had originally, and then here's the final look, right? And so again, this is definitely why shooting RAW and some of these more expensive cameras are so incredible, because it's so much easier to manipulate this image rather than using ProRes. You can see just how much cleaner that looks rather than kind of falling apart like we were using with the ProRes stuff before. Okay, so this is how to use a layer mixer. In this next example, let's go ahead and take a look at how to use parallels. Okay, so in this next shot here, we've got this flag. This was shot in RAW on the Blackmagic Cinema camera, the original 2.5K one. And so if we take a look here, we've got the color space set to film. We want to make sure that's on film, so we're using that log profile. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the same thing, and I'm going to show you a couple of examples of how I did some adjustments there. Okay, so first let's do general exposure and color correction. So let's bring up some of that, kind of get that in the middle. Let's bring the lift down. Let's try to get some shadows kind of down there. We'll bring the gain up just a sliver. Okay, bring the saturation back in. Okay, and then maybe I'm going to bring that. Let's do the saturation using these channels instead. So bring the saturation up using these channels, and that'll allow me to come back here and add just a little bit more. Okay, so that's kind of looking a lot better. Okay, so now everything's kind of up there. Let's do a couple of localized adjustments. So let's do Option S. Okay, we're going to do a little power window here. Kind of pull this out, and we'll do a little bit of a emphasis on some of the stuff here in the center. So bump this up just a little bit, bring the shadows back down. Okay, and then I'm just going to pull, just to push a little tiny bit of warmth in there. Okay, and now let's make sure that's really soft. Okay, I'm gonna do an outside node, same thing, but bring it down so we can kind of see some focus there. Okay, and so now what I want to do is let's really try to add some colorized effects. Let's stylize it. Let's try to make it look, have a unique style with it. Really kind of pull out some of the things in the sunset and some of the stuff here down on the ground. So what I'm going to do now is let's add another node, and what I'd like to do is really do some stuff with the dark things down here. So let's do one of these power windows, pull this down. I'm going to want to flip this. Okay, and let's push that a little bit more green to pull some of that color in there. Okay. Okay, that's starting to push some of our color information a little bit out of the frame, so I'm going to push up back here a little bit. And so let's push back up here on the offset just a little bit to try and get that back up. Okay, So looking good. Okay, so now what I want to do, let's kind of specialize some of the style here. So we've got the grass that's looking kind of cool. Let's go ahead and add, I'm going to do an adjustment on the flag. So let's maybe do that. So I'm going to grab, let's start to add these in parallel. So I want these all to kind of happen at the same time. So this adjustment's doing some of the grass. Now let's add another node. So I'm going to add another node here. I'm going to break this, pull this out to both of these, break this as well. Now let's add a parallel node, and we're going to add one input on here. And so now what this is doing is it's going to be applying both of these adjustments at the same time. Okay, so we've got the one with the grass going through. Now let's take this node and let's do some stuff with the flag. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in here to the flag, and let's just try and qualify the colors of the flag here. Okay, so let's adjust the width, center that up kind of here. Yeah, get some of that a little bit. Blur this out, just a sliver. Okay, gonna go a little bit wider. Try to get more of the shadows on there. Let's see, where's that at here? Oh, there we go. Okay, so widen that up a little bit. Okay, and so I just want the flag there. I've got this, all this selected, so let's qualify that a little bit more with the little power window. So I don't want to get any of that grass stuff. I just want to get the flag. Okay, so we can take the highlight off now so we can see the flag here, and let's push that warmer so make it look kind of like the sun shining through it. Okay, so this is also being applied through the parallel node, so at the same time as this original node. And let's grab maybe one more, and let's try to emphasize some stuff going on with the clouds. So I'm going to add another serial node. I don't actually want it to be a part of that chain, so I'm going to bring that back down into here. Well, actually, let's add one more input, and let's line these all up again. So the top going through there, we're going to feed this into this next node, go that in the second, and then the third here. Okay, and so then finally with this middle one, let's try to do some stuff, interesting stuff here with the clouds. So turn the highlight back on, let's qualify the sky. Okay, again, like we've been doing, adjust the center and the width to just try to get some of that blue. Okay, soften that up. Okay, and with the highlight, okay, so we can bring up a little bit of saturation. So what we're doing here is kind of isolated saturation. We're grabbing certain images, certain parts of the image, isolating the saturation to really pull it out. Okay, so we've got a little bit going on with that, and then, well, let's see. If we turn that one off, it's still a little bit, but the blue's already pretty strong. So maybe what I want to do instead, it might just be easier. Let's just take the qualifier off. Let's reset that. Let's use a power window instead. We'll blur this, or we'll soften that up. Let's bring the size down. Let's kind of push this off this way. Okay. And then I'm going to take the power window off of my viewer, and then I'm just going to push this into sort of a warmer area. Okay. And so then, yeah, so you can see that kind of change the, make it look a little bit warmer there. If I look back at my power window, bring it up a little bit, soften the heck out of that. Okay, so cool. All right, and then lastly, this looks like it's starting to get a little bit strong. So let's go back to this, bring that down just a little bit again, and maybe increase some contrast. Bring some of the exposure up. Now we can warm it back up a little bit. Yeah, now it almost looks like it's glowing a little bit. Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, and so then maybe lastly, we'll just do a little bit of a vignette again, just to draw some more focus in there. Invert that, do some offset stuff going on. Starting to clip a lot of our information, those original shadows. We'll go back to the front, bring the offset just a little bit. Go back in here, bring up this, because that was also a little bit of that. Okay. Okay, and looking pretty good. So if we go full screen, so here's kind of the final image, a little bit of the look there, and then here's the original. Okay. So definitely kind of looking a lot better. Kinda. Okay, cool. So there you go. There's the process. That's really kind of the nitty-gritty of it. Parallels apply all the corrections at the same time to an image, and then a layer mixer applies the things on the top together, and then the qualifier decides what stuff doesn't get that effect or not. Okay, so it's a little bit different. So a principle that is really helpful to use with parallels is you can use this to adjust, make fine-tuned adjustments on people's skin tones. So you could have maybe the general color of their skin tone here, and then take the really tiny red highlights in their ears and their nose and kind of pinch those up a little bit. Have all those things happen in parallel at the same time, whereas the layer mixer is, kind of a different sort of pattern there. Okay, so that's kind of the general overview of how to color inside of Resolve. So hopefully that was helpful. If you have any more questions, please feel free to hit them up here in the comments, and I'd be happy to try to help out a little bit more. And enjoy your time with Davinci Resolve. Okay, we'll see you next time.